to cloud server. Oh, nice. There we go. Excellent. Kia ora, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, good morning from wherever on the planet you are zooming in from. And welcome to this podcast webinar. You can label it whatever you'd like. It's a kōrero, it's a conversation. Ngā ahi e ngiha mai nei with our matua, our elder, our kaumātua, our tohunga here, Ross Smith. Before we kick things off though, we'd like to begin as we do with a bit of an opening karakia or invocation or some words to set the tone right. So matua, if I could hand over to you, kia ora.
Tēnā koe te kai kokiri te kaupapa. Uru te rā, wera te rā, ko te ate ka ihia, ko te ate ka hapara, ko te ate ka pakauru, ko te ate ka tū. Rere mai te ihi, rere mai te wana, rere mai tamanui o waho, rere mai tamanui te rā. Ngā hihi ka hono, ngā hihi ka here, ki te tā ngai o te ao. Tau mai te mauri o rā. Tau ai onuku, tau ai orangi, tau e onuku, tau e orangi. Tēnei te tāhuhu o te rangi, tēnei te papa anu. Tēnei te mana ka tupu, tēnei te ihi ka tupu, tēnei te wairua ka tupu, tēnei te mauri ka tupu, tēnei te ora ka tupu. E aka nui, aka roa, aka tipu, aka tawhito, e aka wānanga. Wānanga rangi, wānanga nuku, wānanga tai au tai. E uru ai te kaua mauna, te kaua uana, te kaua te rākau kaua nui o te wānanga. Ka ke te toru o te wānanga nā tāni tiki atu, tu auri tua te aro nui, me ngā whatu e rua o te wānanga, te whatu te nuku, te whatu kura rangi au ka tai are hutai. Tiri ngā paupauia ki runga ki a papatu anuku. Kia puta e tātou te ira tangata ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama, haumie, uie, tāiki. Tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koe matua. And thank you for that karakia to set off our conversation in a good light. So first things to introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself and then I'll ask Matua Ross to introduce himself. My name is Catherine Murupaenga-Ikenn. No Ngāti Kuri me Te Rarawa. I'm of the indigenous Māori peoples of Ngāti Kuri and Te Rarawa in the North Island of Aotearoa. That's New Zealand, commonly known as by many people. And I've got a bit of a history. Most of my adult life I've been doing advocacy or activism in one shape, form or another for indigenous human rights, Māori and tangata whenua human rights in particular, environmental defence, water defence, social justice and so on. I've had a few roles with the United Nations as a fellow in 2005, a senior Indigenous fellow with the Pacific region in 2020-21, and I'm currently a research consultant for the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to freedom or belief. So that works in really well with tonight's kōrero conversation, because we are going to take a bit of a dive into one particular aspect of Māori people's belief systems in the context of the COVID pandemic and the state's response to that. But we could possibly broaden out to other areas as you do. I'm also a mother of one, and I have a hoa rangatira, my husband, and we live here in Whangārei. So that's a bit about me. Matua, could I invite you to introduce yourself too?
Tēnā koe, tēnā tātou i ngā hau e whā, ko hona mai nei ki tā tātou hui topa I te neahi pō. Ngā mihi ki a koutou ko tatu mai nei ki raro ki te maunga tū mai rā, a parihaka, o jira ki te tātū wata o te ope rākau, me ngā iwi me ngā hapu e noho nei ki whangarei te ringa prāua. Nā reira tēnei mihi atu nā kia koutou. Ko matua Ross taku ingoa, no te rarawa anoa hau. So I hail from a little place called Manukau up in Ahipara in the far north at Te Hikua Tika. And I just want to welcome you wherever you've joined us from, the Four Winds, or you may be local, or you may be living here in Aotearoa. Te waka Māui, te ika Māui. So I just want to invite you into the discussion. My background is I did a Master's in Applied Indigenous Knowledge, and I guess that's where my focus is on atua Māori. And there's a big resurgence of ancient wānanga being reactivated again. We can see it with the wānanga of Te Rangi Mātāmua and his wānanga around star astrology and navigation and his knowledge of the stars and the systems. And of course, Rereata Mākeha and his the activation of his wānanga. Also with Murupaenga-Ikenn, there's discussion around wairuatanga. We also have Mark Kopua, who's now holding sessions of ngā mahi atua, or the work of the gods. And so all of this knowledge has come about because there's we see the world and what's happening to it, and there's a resurgence of indigenous knowledge. So I did a Master's, as I was saying, but I also hold a position as Tauda Pauwhakarai, which is the Māori weaponry. I did 25 years of Māori weaponry underneath the guys and under the teachings of the Wharitu Taua, which is the Māori weaponry school. And of course, I run my own classes here in Whangarei with the Wharitu, the Kōhau Tūtaua o Ngāpui, and also my own school on the around the knowledge of the war god and the god of peace, and trying to see how those two atua reflect one another and work together. So I guess the discussion tonight is around where do our atua Māori sit within a framework of the pandemic? Because there's never been a discussion around that. There's always been a very physical presence of discussion. There's also been a very emotional discussion around the pandemic and its impact on us. But where has there ever been an indigenous spirituality voice talking about how do these things happen? Where do they come from? Where do they emanate from? So I want to try and bring that to this discussion. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Tēnā tātou. Thanks, Catherine.
Kia ora matua. And yeah, you've beautifully segued into, I've got a set of questions here to remind me to ask. One of them was, what was the motivation for us even to come together and have this kōrero? So you've touched a bit on that, and we'll get a bit more into that. First off, I keep saying first off, but it's actually, I think we're into like third or fourth off, a bit of housekeeping. So everyone, this event is being recorded. So there's a lot of people who can't make it this evening for one reason or another. So we're recording this and we will publicize it later. So if you don't want to be seen, you can feel free, or just if you want to save your bandwidth or whatever, you feel free to turn your video off and on as you please. We will be inviting questions later on after Matua Ross has given a bit of a, I don't want to call it a presentation, you're just going to share some of your whakaaro on some of your thoughts on things. And then we're going to invite the listeners to ask questions. So if you pop those in the chat, I'll do my best to monitor them and pick out some key ones to put to Matua Ross to reflect back on. So we're just going to ask for keep it respectful. You know, the thing about COVID can be a bit dicey for some people. It's not necessarily a comfortable topic for some people. So just ask for, you know, bitika bipono bi aroha with your engagement, and we'll be cool. Yeah, so a Q&A after. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So Matua, yeah, if you just want to, I don't know, start sharing your whakaaro about what you introduced there, the, you know, the COVID situation and how our perspective as Indigenous Māori people relates. Sure.
So I guess my thinking and my thoughts, I have to thank Hilini Moko Mead for actually giving me something to think about from his book Tikanga Māori. And he talks about ngā ahi e ngiha mai nei, which is the name of our discussion, and that basically means the fires that flare up. There's a whakatauki or proverb that he also talks about in his book, and it goes taku ahi tū tata taku mata kikoha, taku ahi mamau taku mata kiporo. Which basically means when the fire is burning off in a distance, I don't have to prepare myself to do battle. But as the fire grows closer to me and starts burning at my a lot closer to home, I now have to prepare myself to do battle. So as we, and I guess, you know, he gives a lot of different examples, and some of the examples are genetic engineering, GE modification of our food, surrogate motherhood, intra-fertilization, and for me, it was looking at the virus, and that it was a fire burning off in another country. And we were sitting back here just wondering, when is it going to arrive? When is it going to arrive? And then how do I position myself and find an entry point into this discussion from a Māori worldview? Where do maybe these examples and these events, where can I find them in my pūraka or my stories? So Māori have a story around when Tāne went to get the 3 kits of knowledge, he was attacked by whiro. And whiro sent his plague of insects, and that was to disrupt him, to dislodge him, to disconnect him, to distort his thinking, to distract him from his ascent and descent, to bring knowledge back to mankind. So when I looked at this virus and what it was doing to mankind, I likened it to whiro. And that's what he's doing. He's distorting us, he's separating us, he's causing anxiety, he's causing distraction, he's causing discomfort, he's causing all of those things. That was his responsibility as one of our gods. That was his responsibility, was to keep mankind on their toes, so that you're not sitting comfortable all your life. Whiro needs to come in. And whiro is just an example of those things that get in your way when you're focused, and then you may have a distraction come in, and it's like an insect. It eats at you, and it causes you discomfort. So, I mean, a non-Māori or Pākehā say that, well, is that the equivalent of the devil? I said, no, we didn't have a devil and we didn't have a god. We had an entity, we had a deity, we had a wairua that was responsible for something. And so whiro was responsible for that. Whiro, the root word in whiro is iro. And iro is a maggot. Iro is a maggot. The word iro is maggot. But it's also found in the word whakairo. And carvers would know these things. So our old people, in their observation of nature, would have observed the huhu grub or any grub that ate through timber they can see that it leaves very, very delicate and defined patterns. And so this is them observing their natural environment. And then they would have taken that and said, okay, so how now can we, as indigenous people, keep our stories? Well, let's carve it into timber, carve it into the wood. Let's embed our knowledge and our songs and our genealogy within the wood. So that's another example of whiro and the word, especially the word iro. So, we have Māori, we have these arguments around organ donation, and where do we find organ donation within our pūrākau? Where do we find genetic engineering in our pūrākau, in our stories and narratives? And well, genetic engineering can be put down to when Maui turned himself into a lizard and crawled through the legs of Hinenui Te Bo. That is an example of genetic engineering. We say it in some of our pepeha or our tribal proverbs, kua hau te maunga ko te maunga kua hau, which basically means I am the mountain and the mountain is me. I am the river and the river is me. Isn't that a form of genetic engineering? These are just, we're just having a discussion here. And there's other examples. Maui turned his brother-in-law into a dog. He turned his brother-in-law into a dog, and the dog's name was Irawaru. Oh, his brother's name was Irawaru. And so whenever we see a dog, then we're reminded, this is Irawaru. This is Maui's brother-in-law. And I guess then we, as non-Māori, who do you have to be very, very aware of in your relationships? Is it your mother-in-law or your brother-in-law? Because for Māori, it's your brother-in-law. It's not your mother-in-law. So there's that sort of, I guess so they set a precedence of human characteristic, human behavior, and they're observing and watching these things that are occurring. What is this disease doing to us as mankind? He's just continually consuming and devouring our emotions. So if whiro doesn't, if the virus don't take you, then your emotions will. Around anxiety, around disconnection from your family, around sadness and loneliness. And so whiro is just an analogy of that. And so what are some examples of organ donation? We have statements that we make within our own culture. One of them is homai tō manawa hei oranga he matinga moku, ka hoatu taku manawa hei oranga mau. So basically saying, give to me your heart that I might die, and I give to you my heart that you might live. So it's a statement made around the ultimate sacrifice of I think it was made when Kupe gave his waka to Nukutawhiti. But the heart that he was talking about was that now it's your time to take your people, and you need all the energy, and I will stay back in Hawaii, but you must go and take and be guided by where my heart went to. As we know, Kupe came here first, traversed the Aotearoa and named certain places, and then he left and he went back to Hawaii, and he handed the responsibility of bringing us actually to Nukutawhiti. So in the exchange of the heart, it's saying, go to where I left my heart. Can you see that? Can you see that whole thing? And I guess for If we were looking at surrogate motherhood, we could look at what we call whenua pakoko, or a woman that can't bear children is called a whenua pakoko, that she can't, she's basically a statue. She can't bear children, if whenua pakoko. So there's these examples, but you have to go back into our pūrākau and into our stories to find those examples. And so this is not the response or a response. This is my response to how I was able to come to terms with getting vaccinated and seeing that whiro causes anxiety. In Māori, we would call it awanga, we would call it pōrearea, we would call it moke, we would call it mataku, we would call it all of those names. But those words belong to whiro. Now, when we come over to rongo, and we're calling the vaccine a rongoa, then we're asking for words like Māori, whānau, manaki, wairua, Māori ora, all of those words, because they belong to rongo. So I guess that's where part of my discussion started around that. And I guess one other thing for me is when the vaccine came into into the sacred house of Ngāpui, is that there was no prayer done. There was no karakia done. And I guess that if we had have done karakia, and while people might say, well, it's not a Māori medicine, and I said, well, okay, a Māori vaccine, and I said, okay, then, so why are you calling it a rongoa? Why are you giving it that Atua's name if you don't believe that's what it is, that's its purpose? Call it something else if you don't believe it. But if you are going to get the vaccine, then go knowing that you're ready to go because you're peaceful with it, you're accepting it. Don't go scared, anxious, mataku, because you're only just taking whiro with you. So, like I say, it was my response. It's not a worldwide response. It's not a. If people accept it, and I've talked to many people because they've been anxious, and I said, well, we need to look at where those things sit within our pūrākau and build a tikanga Māori around it, a tikanga Māori framework around it. We talk about if your relation needs a pig's vow, and Hirene Mokomi talks about that. What has that done? Has that changed the Māori of the person? Is that transgressed tapu by accepting a pig's vow? Or is the intention to keep your relation alive, your whanaunga alive? And if acceptance of a pig's vow is what it does, or is what its intention is, then does it change the, I guess, the gene structure or the makeup of their person? Does their Māori change now that they have a pig's vow? Or is it just because the person is alive, their Māori order is intact? So it's just, I guess, just having those discussions as Māori to find, to be very solution focused as opposed to reactive and say, well, we didn't do that. Well, if we look back in some of our stories, you'll find them there. Genetic engineering, Maui turned himself into a bird. We have whakapapa that starts from the stars and it goes down into the rocks and then it goes into mankind. So we're all linked. So these are examples of, I guess, what we saw. We wouldn't have called it genetic engineering, but we can see what that is. Yeah.
Kia ora, kia ora. Pai, this might be a good point, because I've been furiously writing down thoughts of my own, as I'm sure everyone in the audience has been doing. Here's my first thought. It's not really a question, it's just a whakaaro, it's just a thought. I see everything as having a kaupapa. From a Māori worldview, everything has a purpose in the universe, from the smallest organisms, including viruses, because let's remember, viruses had a critical role to play in the evolution of life on planet Earth, including humanity, right? So it's interesting to me, from putting my, my Māori worldview skin on, the narrative about the virus was attack, 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 kill, kill, kill. When, I'm just putting it out there, there might be another narrative, which is, okay, what is the kaupapa of the virus? What's its origin story? And I don't mean the lab origin story. I mean in terms of its purpose in life. It is communicating something to us, and do we have the taringa, the ears to listen? For example, one school of thought is viruses are becoming more prevalent in this Anthropocene age, climate crisis age where humanity is just sprawling throughout nature. And you know what happens when so much humanity and concrete buildings and urban environments butt up against nature? Nature has nowhere to go. And so this is what many scientists are saying, hey, if the virus did come from an animal species, there is a good chance it's because we're not giving animals enough room to just be in their own environment, with a bit of separateness as is appropriate from human like cities and technologies, and we're just encroaching into their space, giving them nowhere to go. And so nature, it could be argued, through the virus is sending us a message. Oi, you guys, you got to stop this. There'll be no nature left if you don't stop this. Another one is, here's a second narrative, possibly. You guys have been living with, you guys humans, have been living with viruses forever, okay? You gotta wonder, how do we get along? And one way to get along, make sure your immune system is strong. It's just like, have you seen in nature a tree that gets attacked by insects or some kind of disease? You can bet it's because the foundation, like I'm talking about the soil, the water, whatever, is polluted, is toxic, is sick. So the virus could be saying something to us like, you guys need to check your health. Are you eating right? Are there too many pesticides in your food? Is your air clean? Is your thinking clean? So from an Indigenous perspective, if that was a narrative that was more promoted to society, maybe the response by the state would be different. Maybe the response from the state wouldn't be, oh, let's at the back end when people get sick, we have all these, health treatments for them. What about if we had a regime of front loading well-being, making sure people could afford healthy organic food? They didn't live in crowded housing where, bugs and things can spread. What about that? Oh, what about people are stressed because they're finding it hard to get work? And your emotional state has a lot to do with your physical and mental well-being. It's all integrated. That's another layer of Indigenous thinking. Holistic. You've got to think holistic. And that means prevention. Are we getting enough vitamin D, enough vitamin C, enough vitamin K? all that sort of thing. And I think you'd find the virus is true. What it's telling us is correct, it's tika. We are not healthy. We are not. So I don't know, Matua, did you have any thoughts about that?
I was just reading what Petty's got to say. Sorry, Catherine, about people waiting in the room or something. Anyway, yeah, I guess it's the parents. I guess it's Rangi and Papa, and it's their response to us as man, as the human being, that you've damaged too much of our creation. I guess what we created, and you're not looking after it, so you need to learn a lesson. Maybe it's hard to say. We are mere mortals, I guess, but there's a lot of things. I mean, you know, what we do unto the earth, we do unto ourselves. So if we are the cause, then we are also the solution. Maybe you know, we're always trying to stop these things from happening. Maybe the course is that it needs to just take its natural course, and there might be another intelligent race of people waiting to occupy our space. As I talked about before, is that we've lost the ability for many of us, and I guess the wānanga will slowly bring that back. There will be generations of it as we start to talk in high frequency. We start to believe in high frequency. We start to send that high frequency language to one another, as opposed to low frequency language. I mean, this whole forum here is about creating a network of wisdom keepers. And as we know, and what we've discussed a lot of the time, Catherine and yourself, Rachel, is that our current education system doesn't teach wisdom. It doesn't grow wise people. So until it does that, we'll be just stuck in the ruts of and just going through the motions. I guess everybody, you know, will change what it is in their family, and then hopefully there'll be a reaction where it will slowly grow. As long as we start teaching our children now and our mokopuna, then they'll take that. Because for them, they haven't been really tainted by what we have been. So if we start to embed some of this stuff into our babies, I guess, even changing that whole process of birth, you know, returning indigenous people returning back to rites of passage, things like that. We don't have rites of passage anymore. Creating rites of passage gave us structure. We knew that this would hurt, or this would happen. This is the knowledge you need for this age group. You're not 5 years old and you're watching things that belong to an 18-year-old, or you're not playing, what do you call that game? You know, feeding a 5-year-old, an 18 and 20-year-old knowledge. Well, not even knowledge. You know, 5 years old, this is what you're learning. Grow, grow, grow. 10-year-old, forget that you're 5-year-old, this is what you're going to be taught, and so on and so on and so on. But we don't do that because they have access to anything. They're becoming adults a lot quicker than, you know, because of the access to information overload through social media, and as we know, all of those things. So
I just see a nice little comment there in the chat box, reflecting about Cody dieback, and like, to me, that's another aspect of this holistic solution building that I think Māori are quite good at, but the Western world likes to deconstruct things and put things in boxes, nice, tidy, you know, compartmentalized boxes, and they miss the big picture. So Matua, you can probably speak more on this than I can, but the holistic element with Kauri dieback is around how there's that relationship between the kauri tree and the tohora, the whale. Hey,
yeah.
Can you speak to that? Because there's in that relationship, in our stories, our Māori stories about that relationship between the kauri tree and the tohora, the whale, there may be a rongoa, a remedy for kauri dieback. And I think some people are already exploring that with whale oil, using whale oil to try and heal the tree or something. Do you know, can you speak to any of that, Matua?
I can talk to a little bit about that, you know. I guess it goes back to the evolution, and that everything crawled off the land. Tani said to his brother that there was nobody looking after the ocean, so he said, I'll go to the ocean, you stay here, but when I die, or when I'm ill and I'm sick, I'll return to you. And I guess when we look at that, we can see the massive whale strandings around the world globally, and for indigenous, for Māori, that was already in our story, that there was nobody looking after the ocean, so the whale left the land and went to go and live in the ocean. But he said to Tane, I'll return. And so we have rituals around, you know, fleecing of whales, and that the eye is of the whale is returned back to Tangaroa. And the kauri, if you have a look at it very closely, the bark is like the barnacles, I guess, of the whale. But we also have a connection with rimu, you know, rimu being the seaweed, and then we have rimu, which is the tree. And if you have a look at them very closely, they're quite similar. So there's those connections between the gods. And what I mentioned in my karakia is the tāngaingai, which is the umbilical cord of the gods. That all of those gods are connected somehow. And that, you know, when there's an earthquake, that's the baby, then you have the whenua, and then you have Tangaroa, you know, the tidal wave is created, and that's Tangaroa, and then you have the wind that assists him in blowing the waves onto the shore, so that's Tāwhiri Mātea. So when there's a destruction, these are all these connection of these gods working together. There's not just one working alone on its own. Same with navigation. You got Tangaroa there. You got Tāne as the waka. You carve the waka. That's Tāne. You got the sea as the platform, or the one to carry them. And then you put your sail up, and you've got Tāwhiri Mātea. So they all assist one another somehow. So that's a tāngaingai, what we call a tāngaingai. Oh, that's what I call it anyway. An umbilical connection. And I've done a presentation on the umbilical cord of the gods. My own sort of thinking with some of the people that I'm working with, or have worked with in my days of wānanga. Some very, very wise sages that are all sort of gone now. But their knowledge, the world wasn't ready for it. Now the world looks like it's ready for it. We can see a big resurgence and reactivation of Māori knowledge. It's needed.
Mm. And one thing that I find, I must admit, one thing I find quite annoying is the attitude towards Indigenous knowledge, like it's compared with Western science. And in that comparison, it's seen as something lesser than. When we think about it, what is science but just observation of cause and effect? And then, you know, you hypothesize, you theorize, and then you test to see if your hypothesis is correct, again, by observation of what happens in an environment, a petri dish or the forest or the ocean or something. And that's science in a nutshell. And that's what Indigenous peoples have been doing since Maira no, like forever. So why, you know, to me, why is it so hard for Western science? And I don't think any of us really have an answer. It's just, you know, maybe I'm venting, but we need Western science to open up the tent, right? And have Indigenous wisdom come in so we can collaborate and partner more about solution building, because Western science absolutely does not have all the answers to all of our human crises. They just don't. If they did, we wouldn't be in this predicament in the first place. I would go further to say that a lot of our problems as, you know, evolved so-called humans is because the technology we have developed, we're too immature to handle. I mean, come on, a nuclear bomb, come on. But that's just, you know, one example. And with climate crisis, what we're seeing is a lot of like a push to use technology to techno-fix our way out of our problems. That is not going to work. It's not going to work. So it's like we're almost, we are deliberately dodging having to deal with the root cause of our crisis, which is one in consciousness, in our spirit, you know, a metaphysical rongoa remedy, if you will. I think that's, we're just too scared to go there. We got to ask ourselves, why are we too scared? I'm not talking about organized religion, by the way, everybody. I'm not talking about organized religion. Beautiful if you belong to a faith, that's all good. But I'm talking about something a bit more transcendent than that. Me, for example, I don't have an intermediary between me and my gods. I don't. I have a direct line. It's just the way I roll. But, you know, we love the religions that have helped evolve humanity. And there have been some religions that have in the past warred and been up for, you know, violating human rights, and still doing that today in some respects. Yeah, so that's just that's what that causes me to think. And the other thing that actually I've written down here as a reminder to myself is about whiro. And you just said, Matua, how the gods, you know, they're all doing their thing simultaneously. Whiro, I see, you know, can be partly about the rongoa of a vaccine. And we can, as humans, come to terms with, you know, the fears we have about it, or whatever other whiro energies there are around it. At the same time, we have like big pharmaceutical corporations who are creating these vaccines. And if anyone's been paying attention, pharmaceutical companies are the biggest criminals on the planet. Arguably, they have been taken to court for the harm caused by their medicinal treatments, including vaccines, to the tune of billions of dollars of harm. And that's just what's been acknowledged. That's just the tip of the iceberg showing above the water. You don't even know what's going on that whistleblowers don't blow the whistle about. So that's whiro too, isn't it? There's whiros on every side. That's the many faces of whiro. You know, I think I might have mentioned that to somebody. I coined it as whiro matarau, whiro, the many faces of whiro. So you know, you have to be quite discerning when you are taking action in any regard, you know, about the many faces of whiro. But then there are the other gods, the many faces of the other gods. And how do you take all that complexity and you find your own truth about whether, and because the kaupapa here is COVID, we're just hooking that because it's a very topical one at the moment, but it could be any kaupapa. You have to find your truth about whether you want to take the vaccine or not, because there are rongoa which are natural and not lab-made that could help with combating against a virus that we have lived with for eons as human beings.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit more complicated than the establishment narrative from the state might present to us, is what I'm, from an indigenous perspective, is what I'm saying. And no one has to agree with me. I'm just saying that's my perspective on it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, Piro, that was his responsibility, because when the separation of the parents was being, I guess, arranged, all the gods got together, and I guess it's an evolution process, and it's our evolution process and our story of creation, and that Tāne was given the responsibility. His name became Tāne Nuiarangi, the one to retrieve the 3 kits of knowledge. And Piro was pissed off because, well, you know, just using that as a story, I guess. He wasn't given the responsibility yet. He was the older in our stories. He was the older brother, and why wasn't he given it as the tuakanga, that responsibility to bring back that knowledge? And there's stories of tāwhaki as well. I'm just using the story of Tāne, and he went by the kaumātua. But those kits, you know, people will say, so are you saying that they climb the heavens? And I'm saying, no, those kits of knowledge exist within you. It is your job to go and retrieve them. And you do that by 3 things. You know, Tuauri was the name of the first kit. Tuatea was the name of the second kit, and Aronui, and they have another name, Uru Uru Tau, Uru Uru Rangi, and Uru Uru Matua. Those are some of the other names. And so I've always thought, what do those kits, how do they exist? So I looked at, what do you need to do before you can do anything in your life, or make a move on anything, even like tonight? And to me, that's the first kit. That's tua uri. And the word tua means beyond. And the word uri, and it's short for uri, means in the darkness. So you've got to reach into that place and pull from it what it is that you want to reveal, or what you want to exist, or to talk about. Tua uri. And then I've always wondered that sometimes, and you've probably had these things too, that these revelations come to you through dreams, through epiphanies, through ideas, through thoughts, through all of those things. And maybe that's the first kit, is tua uri, because you cannot do anything without having a thought first and foremost. Doesn't matter what it is. And then the second kit is tuatea. And when I look at the word tuatea, I look at our structure of our marae, and the domain of Tohunga is, or the god of war, is the atea outside the marae. And so for tuatea means to be challenged. You're challenged. This is where the debate happens. This is where the discussion happens. This is where the planning happens. This is where all of those things happen, where you're going to be, your thought has got to go through a process of argument, a process of, and this is where the kaipakatara comes in, I guess, looking at that thought, let's pull it apart now. Well, no, I don't agree with it. Oh boy, that's all good. And you're going to be challenged on your thought. So I guess for me, that's the second kit. And the last kit is aro nui. Now, aro means presence, to reveal, and nui means to the greater. So anything you do, you have to have a thought, you have to go through a process of that thought, and then it's presented, and that is the result of your thought. So even like tonight, you know, myself and Catherine thought about this. That's our first kit. Then we thought, okay, so how are we going to do that? How are we going to structure it? What does it look like? How are we going to plan it? Who are we going to be inviting in? So that's the second kit. And I guess the result is that you're here now sharing in the information. So that's that's my own perspective on these 3 kits of knowledge. And so when Tane went to go and get that, we're going to be distracted in what our focus is. And so Piro was given that responsibility of saying, no, you're not going to get that knowledge. I'm going to stop you from getting that knowledge. I'm going to distract you from your focus. I'm going to distort your thinking. You're not going to finish your assessment. You know, those things, they can be as simple as that, or they can be as harsh as we need to blow that bus up. Sorry, this is a real extreme, this is an extreme example. So a religion and a belief system has that thought. Okay, they indoctrinate and they pull into that, they indoctrinate a person into that belief system around that. We need to blow that school bus up. You're going to be the one to do it because you're going to meet Allah in the next life, and you will be honored. So then we start to believe these things. Oh, strap the bombs to your body, and then the result is, of course, the killing of innocent people. So the kits, good and bad, came in the kits. You know, good and bad came in the kits. And I guess that's where you get that thing, well, everybody has a choice. Yeah, that's right. What do you take from the kits? How do you think? What are what dreams are you receiving? For me, I see a lot of what we all know. You could call it an epiphany, you could call it a deja vu or whatever, has existed in another time by somebody else, and they've passed on, and now they're sending you back to say, sending you some sort of signal to say to you, it's time for that knowledge now. And you're just you're the one who is you're receiving it. Like a lot of this knowledge here, Papa Hohepa talked about it many years ago, but people weren't ready for it. So he trained us to think, and he said one day it will return. And he passed away, and now we've been able to access it. Not just me, but there's many of us. And whether they come in dreams, whether they come in ideas, whether they're returning. Our ancestors are not over on the other side doing nothing. You know, they're not twiddling their thumbs. They know the state that we're in, and they need people now to start to share, I guess, this knowledge. But you're going to come up against a lot of disbelievers. You go, oh, the supernatural, blah blah, all of those things. So.
What I love about, all those people who go, the supernatural, blah, blah, actually, if they examine science today, they would find quantum physics is verifying indigenous knowledge to be correct, profoundly correct. We knew about quantum physics before they did. Hey, I'm just saying. It's true. We know about fractal universe. We know that we descended from, our origin story as human beings and everything in the universe descended from te kore kore. If you want to, equate that in some way with the Big Bang, we already knew that. What do we think the story of, the first sort of, ko te pū, ko te well, ko te more was? That's talking about leading up to the Big Bang. Or maybe that was just moments after. I don't know, Matu, if you want to talk about that, but that's that whole idea of this energy, conscious thought, whatever, seeking out. And then it's like likened to a vine, like a vine, sort of creeping, seeking, consciously looking in the darkness. And then you get to this, like this realm of te kore kore, and kore means nothing, but we have this, there's this thing with the Māori language, if you put the same word beside itself, it has a meaning that's not double that, but transcendent of that. So te kore kore wouldn't mean the realm of nothingness. It means the realm of what I was told, pure potential. And that's where everything was birthed out of that. So, you know, we knew about all this quantum physics and stuff ages ago. And why was I going on about that? Oh, because it reminded me of something. So like in 2012, funny, this random thought I just had. In 2012, the World Council of Churches apologized to Indigenous peoples. For what? For the doctrine of discovery, which they perpetrated against us and used as justification, not that it was just an excuse, but they used it as a justification to steal our lands, to create genocide against Indigenous peoples, all that sort of thing, right? Colonization, still happening today. They apologized for it in 2012. What I would call on is the scientific community to apologize for their version of the doctrine of discovery, because they keep going around Indigenous people's communities, stealing our ideas, our knowledge, you know, our genetic material, everything, and they take it back to their labs or whatever, or they write in their journals, get peer reviewed, all these theses and all the rest of it, claim it as their own. E hara. No, it's not. They should apologize and they should stop doing that. You know, that's why I say the scientific community need to just fess up and say Indigenous people's knowledge is legit, and we need to like talk, you know, as equals, not, you know, as science is up here and Indigenous knowledge is down here. That's so last millennium thinking. And I'm not just saying this because, you know, I'm resentful or, you know, all those other fiddle things. I'm angry, I'm grieving, which I am kind of, you know, that part of fiddle is affecting me. But more so I'm like, so I'm sorry, but the planet needs solutions, and there ain't none coming from, you know, the Western world, which really means anything. All they're doing is like, oh, let's continue the same behavior and expect different results. So that's not going to help us. Don't people know we need now like 5 planet Earths to continue this level of consumption? Do people not know? That's not sustainable. It's not. And Indigenous peoples have been saying that, the Hopi prophecies, you know, all sorts of Indigenous peoples prophesizing for so long about reaching this state in the Anthropocene right now. Who's listening to us? No one. No one. And we've got children's lives at stake. They deserve a future, don't they? So yeah, whiro is, like you say, Matua, trying to disrupt us from gaining those, you know, it might be metaphorical, it might be an analogous sort of stories, but it's also at some level real. We're being stopped from accessing those 3 baskets of knowledge so we can critically analyze where the dang we are right now as humanity and how to fix it. So yeah, I wish more people would sort of be exposed to this kōrero that we're having, Matu, and go, yeah, that's deep. And why aren't our schools teaching this stuff? You know, critical analysis thinking. That's what we need. We need a new theory of change. So yeah, I've been talking for too long. If anyone has some questions they want to put in the chat, I'm going to start taking a peep over there. Please feel free to ask away, and we'll get Matua, we'll do some reflections about whatever. Or did anyone have, you know, something they'd like to, like, yeah, make a contribution, like awaha, not just in the chat, but you want to like can turn your mic on and you can have a say if you like.
I just, so Kira, I'm Rachel Elliott. I just wondered, Catherine, when you were speaking around that in relation to, and agree around the Western, the dissecting, the scientific knowledge dissecting, and not having seeing the whole picture with a holistic view. But I wondered in that kore, what came to mind was that is it not better that they are discovering this, they're starting to see and they're starting to discover this stuff, and so understand that Indigenous peoples have had this knowledge for a long time, and yes, they're taking and dissecting. That dissecting's not good, but if it leads to further enlightenment in the world, is that not a good thing?
Excellent, excellent. Yes, I love that question. My first response, just first thing that comes to mind, that is awesome. If, others with expertise could use traditional or Indigenous knowledge for good. You know what my response? A lot of the time they don't use it for good. They use it to make profits. That's what disaster capitalism is all about. Big corporations take our knowledge to make money for them. Right? Number one. Number two, if the free, prior and informed consent of Indigenous peoples was acquired before these, scientific groups or corporations or whatever took our knowledge and used it, all good. But you know what? That rarely happens. Really. And I mean, not R-E-A-L-L-Y, I mean R-A-R-E. Yeah, rare. How many people are familiar with the Y262 Aotearoa Māori Flora and Fauna claim? Yeah, so that origin story for that claim goes way back, to the 80s and then to the 90s. So that claimant group is still today fighting for the government to implement the Waitangi Tribunal recommendations relating to that claim. And that claim is probably the broadest ranging claim on the Waitangi Tribunal's books ever. It's basically a self-determination tino rangatiratanga claim. Okay. And it started off with the kumara. Everything's got to start with something. It started off with the kumara officially. And you had this Japanese group of scientists, speaking of scientists, they came and they saw our kumara and they were like, oh, I think we'll take some of these tubers back to Japan, to our lab, and we'll do whatever they intended to do scientifically with them. And a couple of our kuia, Dao Wihongi, Sana Murray, they were like, oi, no, you don't. You know what they did? They flew over to Japan and they brought those back. And that was the beginning. It was like, gee, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What the heck? Everything else is the world doing to our Mātauranga Māori, our Māori knowledge, our culture, our traditions, our genetic material that's in our native flora and fauna, taking it away, looking for medicinal uses for it and making money out of it. Things like taking our images, taking the haka, taking our waiata, even our own individual people's names get copyrighted, and then a person with a name can't even. I'm thinking of Moana Maniapota Jackson. I think she was the one, the musician. She couldn't even use her name over in Europe because someone in Europe had copyrighted her name or something. She found she couldn't even, how ridiculous is that? So back to your question, Rachel, really great question. The answer is like, yeah, No, it's just more colonization. If they would, you know, if people would just respect us, or respect any indigenous person or community around the planet. It's just the same scenario, just swap in and out different indigenous people's names. So yeah, awesome question. Matua, did you have anything else to add on to my thoughts on that? You might have to turn your mic on, eh?
So when you take the kumara, do you take just the kumara, or do you take its whole origin and its whakapapa with you as well? Because it comes from under the mantle of rongo, you know, and so when you do that and you move it into another country, do you take rongo with you as well? Or rongo matani, do you take rongo as well with you? You know, it's sort of all those things, eh? It's like a friend of mine saying the pine cone, the pine tree growing here is not as big as the pine trees that grow in where it originated from. The pine needles are huge, and the indigenous people use them for medicine, and the pine cones are, you know, huge. And he said when we took the seeds of the pine cone, the pine tree, and planted it here, what didn't come with it was the squirrel, because it's the squirrel that takes the seeds around as part of its life cycle. So to them, everything's got to be intact. That whole whakapapa of that kumara has to, if you're going to take it into another land, then you got to take the karakia with it. You got to take the whakapapa with it. You got to, not just the kumara, because it's a very, well, to Māori, it's a sacred thing. It's used in a lot of rituals. The kumara, as you know. And I guess there's things like, you know, us as human beings being stupid and thinking that you get that a boa constrictor can live in a high-rise apartment in New York. You've taken something out of its natural environment and you expect it to live. It's like taking a polar bear and putting it in a forest. But that's what we do. We just took to with things that we have no control over, actually. You know, so, oh yeah, sweet potato or yeah.
Yeah, so I just, in case there were people on the call who aren't from here, I just sort of put it.
And I mean, the kumara comes under the mantle of Rongo Matani, which is the god of cultivation. Rongo Marairo, Rongo Haume Tiki Tiki here. So they all attach themselves to a god.
Yeah, just like the human body, right? My sister does miri miri. She does traditional healing. Miri miri, just FYI, it's not massage. It's not. Miri miri, she describes it as taught to her by, you know, Hohepa Delame and other Tohunga experts in the field. She refers to it as body work, body agitation. Okay, it's not massage. And she knows, and I think Matua, we even discussed this on one of our morning calls, karakia sessions perhaps, there's a atua that rules over every part of the body. And so you can actually, I can't personally, because this isn't my area of expertise, my expertise lies in other areas, not miri miri, but you can call on different atua, different deities, energies, gods, what have you, to help with the healing, if you have something in the body that needs healing. But you know, you go to a mainstream doctor, hey, and you rock up with that idea and they'll go, pfft. So, you know, again, if we're coming back to this whole COVID response, if we as Māori wanted a holistic response to COVID, we would be drawing on all of these, you know, knowledges of ours. Did I say knowledges? Knowledge, yeah, many, yeah, areas of expertise and knowledge, to help, you know, fortify ourselves in a preventative way, firstly, and then if we get hit by the virus and we need an extra boost of, you know, good healing juiciness, whatever, we would again draw on our practices and our knowledges for remedies, for rongoa, you know, including in the ngahere, the bush, including in our clean rivers, which actually ain't so clean now. See, here's another aspect to the COVID response. You need clean water. Water is sacred. And if we're going to cleanse ourselves with, you know, what we're drinking and what we're, you know, externally healing ourselves with water, it has to be clean. I tell you, people outside of New Zealand think we've got beautiful, pristine environments. Rubbish. And again, is the virus just a real evil thing, or is it trying to tell us something? Your water is putrid, people. I'm just saying. I'm pretending I'm the virus. I'm just saying. You know, put yourself, here's the thing to do, you know, because in a fractal universe, you are me and I am you. I'm the water and the water is me. Put yourself then in the shoes of the other. And then think, oh, what's going on with me? Why am I behaving like this? Oh, I'm a virus. I'm trying to tell them something. They ain't listening. But, you know, there's a lot going on with this whole pandemic that is just hushed up and quiet. And I don't even know if our Māori leaders are looking at it this way, but I am. I've always looked at it that way. You know, our Māori leadership, God bless them. Hey, I want to big ups to our Māori leadership, because they did what they did, you know, at the time, which was try and protect by keeping the virus out of our communities. That was amazing. I got to say, that was amazing. And yet there's still another level of amazingness that our Māori leadership could have taken, which is the stuff we're talking about here. Empowering stuff, because the messaging coming out from the state, a lot of it was scaring people, you know, and there's another narrative that could have been more empowering for people. I'm just saying. You know, I don't know what you guys think. Feel free to, you know, contribute a thought.
Tēnā koe.
I'm conscious of giving other people the opportunity to talk. But I suppose in response to that question, for me, I found that very much that I found that the narrative, I struggled to look at the vaccine as rongoa when it was requiring a narrative of fear to you know, it was being pushed with a narrative of fear. So that's something that I struggled with, and I must say that you know, Mātua Ross and his, you know, what he's taken us through tonight and his journey and looking at it helped me, because it helped me to be at peace with my decisions, and that I stopped kind of getting wound up and exploring and researching and letting it consume me, and I just went into the ngahere and just let it be, and then that's when the peace came to me and my decisions, and yeah, so yeah, thank you, Mātua Ross, for your journey and for sharing it, because it definitely helped. It reminded me to look at, you know, look into me and look into my darkness and understand me a little bit more, and to stop looking and just let it alight upon me. So, kia ora.
I'd just like to invite anyone else to, like, you know, throw their 2 cents worth in, if you'd like to. I'll keep keeping that door open. because that's what we do. And while there's some like a not, I don't like the phrase dead air, but while there's a moment, I can drop it in there because I've still got a lot of thoughts written down on my page, but I don't want to hog the space. But I did have a thought, and it was, Matua, when you were talking about how, you know, these 3 baskets of knowledge and how it relates to, we have self-determination, we have, you know, our own mana motuhake, our own authority to think, you know, using like as almost as a framework, those 3 baskets of knowledge as a critical analysis framework almost. And Tāne Mahuta was ascending to acquire them, and Whiro was doing his best to prevent that. Something about that reminded me of the Christian story about the, you know, the apple tree, the tree of knowledge, right? And you had this persona, which is kind of like Whiro, except it was encouraging, Adam and Eve to eat from the tree, because I don't know if anyone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong, but there's one school of thought that says that that tree was, at once you consumed of it, it actually gave you the faculties to be self-determining and think for yourself. And once Eve did that, that's what happened. She was like, oh, I'm naked, and she wanted to cover herself up. You know, she became more aware of things somehow. So yeah, I'm just seeing there's a little bit of, there's some echoes between the 2 stories. So the kits of knowledge, once we utilize them, our awareness of things theoretically should increase. But then of course, when you have more knowledge and information, that is power. And the question becomes, how do you wield your power, for good or for bad? For good or for bad. And to me, the Christian story, acquiring knowledge from the tree, you know, by eating the apple, that gave us the faculties as human beings to, you know, with knowledge comes power. So we gained this new power, right? Did we use it for good or bad? Dun, dun, dun. But we have to constantly question ourselves, we have to constantly question ourselves. That testing thing you talked about, you know, going into the domain of, you know, tuātea, and you're challenging and you're testing theories, you know, you're debating, you're arguing, you know, get out of your echo chamber. That's the kai whakatara space. It's, you know, we talk about the kai whakatara. That's the person who challenges the established narrative. That's the person who's like devil's advocate. That's the person who suggests a plan B. That's a person who says, did you think about this? You know, that's something I was taught to be by my kaumātua. And I tell you, my community hates me and loves me for it. Hates me and loves me for it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. The other part to that whole narrative around the acquisition of knowledge is that he went to the wharepu moto of Io. Now, Papa Hohepa told me that the wharepu moto, like you were talking about different parts of your body, is the fontanelle of the baby, where it's open. Yeah, that's the pu moto. So, you know, when that's open, that's when you feed knowledge. That's when you send the messages to their baby, because it will eventually close up. But they will have what it is that you have sent them. But then they have to go through their own journey, but they will never lose that knowledge. It will, something in their life will trigger it again. So that's the wharepu moto of io. That's the kōrero from Papahohepa. So we all had that wharepu moto when we were babies, but what knowledge were we being fed at that time when it was open? What did it, what vibrations and what energy was it being fed with? Back in the day, pre-European, would have been karakia, incantations, all of the requirements of that time. You know, what it needed to know to be able to grow, to be able to function in that environment. And so, you know, we had that opportunity then too, but we didn't know that was the importance of it. We just knew it as a fontanelle, I guess. I think that's what they call it, eh? In the Pākehā, was it? Yeah. It's like the connection of your brain stem to your brain. It's called a mōtoi. A mōtoi. So the spine where it connects to your brain is called mōtoi. What do they call it in pituitary gland? Is it pituitary gland? Is that what they call it in English? So it has a function as well. So all of those parts of the body, I mean, you know, left and right hemispheres of your brain called rongo matane, rongo mai taha nui and rongo mai taha rangi. So there you have rongo. You know, you have the deity of rongo as part of your brain, and the brain. There's another name for I guess where the brain sits, and that's called tāne te maurangi. So there you have tāne sitting in that space as the protector of rongo. So we already had all those things, you know, so that's why it's quite easy for me to say, ai, he atu aho. You know, I am a god. I am not a religious god, but I come from those parts because those are the parts of my body that, you know, that make me that is my makeup. Tāwhiri mātea gave us the ability to breathe, which is our pūkahukahu, which are our lungs. You know, as we've talked about, tāne and our ability to acquire and to disperse knowledge, that's tāne. Tangaroa is the water. You know, bodies are made up of, what is it, 80–90% water. That's tangaroa. Your sinew and your muscle and your strength comes from tumatauenga, and your ability to do battle, to be able to defend yourself, comes from tumatauenga. So, you know, they already part of you. I guess what you have to ask yourself is, in your current situation, in what you do currently, which of the atua guide your philosophical beliefs? Like your sister, she's a practitioner of miri miri. So who are her atua that guide her hands, that guide her way that she thinks? Which atua were the gods of that whole practice? Yeah. Māori weaponry, it's tumatauenga, but you must understand that mankind, the very first thing they had to know what to do was to kill. Yeah. And we're still doing it today. We take fish from out of its environment, from where it breathes, and we kill it by pulling it out of the water. We pull the vegetables out of the garden from where it's growing, so that we can go and kill it and put it in a pot. We snare birds, kill them so that we can eat. But the reason was different. We needed to survive. But in the survival, we went through our rituals and we put karakia to them, and we put a ritual to it. And we put a deity to it, knowing the deity or the atua looked after their place. And that's why I say when the tohunga dies, the atua die. So when the practitioners of garden are no more, and we have to continue to get our vegetables from back and safe, then there'll be no connection to rongo matane and rongo maraeroa and home tiki and all those things. So
it's quite profound what you said, I reckon, Matua, because we think of the gods as these supreme, all-powerful beings, but what you just said makes them out to be incredibly vulnerable, actually. You know, and it reminds me of the Greek gods, you know, Olympus. I don't know if, anyone remembers these kōrero, but the gods on Olympus, they often talked about the fact that we need those humans down there to attend to the altars that pay homage to us, to have us in their prayers often, daily, because when they stop doing that, we die. We literally just go poof out of existence. The only, you know what that says to me, actually, is the science, both, well, indigenous, but Western as well, triangulated with, that consciousness creates reality. If it is not for the thought, there would be no molecular world. And this is what quantum physics is saying, which corroborates what you were just saying about when the tohunga dies, the atua dies, because it's not thought of, it's not spoken of, and there is no action associated with, therefore, whatever the thing is, it's gone. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And if that ain't quantum physics, I don't know what it is. You know, hey, I got to say also, what you were saying reminded me of another conversation happening over there, wherever there is, everywhere over there. But it's in the activism space, whether that's environmental defense or climate crisis mitigation, adaptation, activism by like Extinction Rebellion and many other groups. But they're talking about, because you mentioned, the energies of different atua gods, like rongo of peace and tumatoenga, the warring arts and so on. And those are the two energies which there's a conversation going on around that right now, which is, a lot of protest has been like so-called non-violent, and we really believe in non-violence in our protests against whatever. The truth is a lot of successful movements, campaigns, such as civil rights, women's suffrage, anti-apartheid, no nukes, you name it, environmental defense, have all had a militant arm. So, when you think about the window that is left with humanity right now is really closing fast to do anything to salvage what we have left of this civilization of ours, the biodiversity of ours. And by ours, I mean, we don't own it, but they're our whanaunga, they're our relatives, right? They're our kin. So if we want to save our kin, our relatives, not to mention the fact that the air we breathe comes from the ocean and the forests, the food, everything we need to survive is disappearing fast. So that window is closing. So are we just gonna draw on the energy of rongo, or are we gonna change tack and draw more on the energy of tumatoenga? And they're not couching it in that way. I'm couching it in that way, but that's the gist of what they're saying. I'll just drop that in there to give people something to think about, because who are the real terrorists is really the question here. It ain't us defenders, that's for sure. We're defending life. We're defending life. We're not destroying it like they are. So who are the real terrorists? And if your children or your mother is being threatened, her life is being threatened, are you just going to write a petition? Really? Are you just going to stand outside a building holding a placard with a sign on it? Really? That's the conversation that's happening right now. So, yeah. 3 kits of knowledge, critically analyze.
Yeah.
Just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
While there's something left to salvage at all.
I guess it's the belief in, you know, our old people, because of their oratory, because of their rituals, because of the language they spoke about death, they weren't afraid of it. You know, the last night was a big hoo-ha and a big celebration, but more about this person's life. But we've come to a place in our lives about, do those places actually exist? Do the rangitu haha actually exist? Is there life after death? As we spoke, you know, as we speak about in our oratory that's been passed down, do I actually go back to Hawaii Nui, Hawaii Roa, Hawaii Pao Mau Mau? And if I do, where are they? So being trying to, you know, be critically aware of those, critique even some of the sayings of your ancestors, and questioning, okay, matua, we hear this all the time. Can you give me an explanation of where Hawaii Nui, Hawaii Roa, and Hawaii Pao Mau Mau are? And do they exist? And when I pass away, am I going to go there?
That's a good one. Yeah,
you know, because when our youth hear, oh, you know, Hariki Hawaii Nui, Hawaii Roa, Hawaii Pao Mau Mau, they're thinking about drinking pina coladas under a pine tree or something. That's the sort of only Hawaii that they understand, or Hawaii with the hula girls. So, you know, are we afraid of death? Do we believe that there is life after death? Am I going to return as a hero, maybe?
I could think of worse.
Oh, well.
Hey, if all you know is, like, you know, being a worm or a maggot and eating what you love all day, you don't know no different. It's all good.
You got no problems.
You got a real important kaupapa. If it weren't for maggots, things wouldn't compost.
That's right.
Oh, please.
So Iro's got a big, you know, he's got an important job.
Yeah, totally.
We wouldn't break down if we didn't have them.
Imagine everything that would just pile up if it wasn't for Iro.
And just rot. Yeah, so, you know, you got to think in those sort of
holistic again.
Yeah.
Holistic, big picture. You know, when you that raises so many, it triggers a lot for me. I think if people had a more empowering relationship with life/death, because in a fractal universe, everything is both a value and its opposite. Glass half empty, half full, same time. There isn't one or the other, you know. If people had a more constructive, empowering relationship with life/death, maybe we would have a different attitude to the COVID pandemic. I'm just putting it out there. But people were so scared. And, you know, so let's be honest, some people had a legitimate reason to be terrified because of their comorbidities. I'm not talking about them. They had a legitimate reason. But for other people, it's like, okay, if you got COVID, you might have a really serious bout of like flu symptoms and stuff. But if you took care of yourself, you could get through it. And more than that, children barely got a scratch. Children, this is science, people. Okay, go look it up. Don't believe me, go look it up. Children were barely affected by it. And yet we're forcing like them to, under duress. By force, I mean, there's a lot of, again, establishment narrative pressure to vaccinate your children, but do they really need it? Do they really need it? And here's the thing that really upsets me too. There's a lot of things that upset me, you can tell about this. There are people in the world who did not get access even to a first dose. And here we are in privileged Aotearoa getting our third dose, boosters and whatnot. Come on, where's the equity in that? That politically, that's where my resistance lay to getting a booster and whatnot. When I'm like, hey, what about third world countries? Are they less human than us? What the hell? I was not happy. I'm still not happy.
I think some of them, it's been proven that they're better off. Some areas in Africa, it's been proven that they're actually better off having
that's right.
not had access. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, crazy, right? What is it about their profile of their population, why they didn't get access to vaccines and yet they had lower death rates and exposure to the virus than we did? And here's the thing, why wouldn't health experts be super, super, super interested in investigating that? Tell me. Because if they didn't have to pay for their population to get vaccinated, they would have saved billions, I don't know, millions at least, for their country, right? From their budget of their country. Imagine if all the states of the world could save that money and dedicate it to something else more meaningful, like, oh, I don't know, education, oh, I don't know, health, other areas of health. You got to ask. And this is what I say about the 3 kits of knowledge, right? That Matua was talking about. One of the kits there, tuatea, probing, challenging authority. Ask. How come, if you ask the wrong question, you can get the right answer. It still don't mean nothing. You got to ask the right questions. Why is there just this one blanket approach to the COVID response? And here's another group that had an alternative approach. The Great Barrington Declaration, if you want to go look it up, the Great Barrington Declaration. There are a bunch of scientists. They're not nobodies, they're somebodies. Yale, Harvard, Oxford, specializing in epidemiology and such. They said, actually, there's a more effective way to deal with the spread of the virus, and it's around focused protection of the vulnerable. Not locking everyone down. That actually doesn't help. By the way, the World Health Organization didn't say, we agree with mandates and lockdowns. They were actually advising, to that's not actually, the best way to go is heavily mandate everyone, because there are other spin-offs, there are other unintended consequences, societally, I mean. And this is where you get like people who mistrust institutions. And let's remember, the level of mistrust is the highest in the world in institutions, governments and whatnot that it's ever been. You want Aotearoa to go the way of Trump, keep doing what we're doing. That's how it happens. So we need to be more open-minded about our approaches to things. That's what kete tuatea might indicate to us. Probe, question, don't take things at face value. Don't look just at symptoms, go deeper, okay? So I'm not saying anything's right or wrong. I'm just putting that out there for people to consider that there's another way. There's always another way. This is what this is about. Mai moko kauai on the chin. Okay. Elements in here say there's always a way out. Not just one way. Because I tell you what, the universe is more diverse than just a one-track mind. Sorry, that's nature. She's diverse. So all aspects of reality are diverse. So if you think the government's, you know, messaging is just, oh, just hand on heart, believe it. I don't know why you do that. Just saying. Anyway.
And I think that's important, is that, you know, to challenge yourself as well, to challenge our own thinking, to look at different ways. So not just leaving it up to someone else to challenge, but we should all be doing that within ourselves as well. To, you know, to question ourselves and to really be confident in our own thoughts, and be at peace with our own thoughts, is to challenge them. Yeah. And yeah, I had some other things, but it's gone, so I can't.
That's beautiful though. Might I just say that's beautiful, because Matua was talking about, you know, the context of the three kete. When you aggregate, you know, our putting those into action, that's self-determination. When you don't, you're giving away your sovereignty. You're giving away your power, is the flip side. If you are not taking advantage of those kete of knowledge and putting them into action, basically you're giving someone else the power over you to do your thinking for you. That's what you're doing.
And I think that's where, you know, like where you mentioned about the militant arms and stuff. And I think yes, there's, you know, with everything, I think there's a time and place for both. And I think there's people that are destined for one or the other, or, you know, and that's Mātua Ross, you mentioned in the old days, there were, you know, people were born that were to one way or the other, you know, that was their path in life. And I think for me, it's that questioning and challenging ourselves is important, that we also don't lose ourselves in the cause, that we bring ourselves back and ground ourselves and don't, you know, it's like in a business, it's like when you implement something, you should recheck in a little while to say, hey, is it working as intended? Do we need to tweak things? Do we need to change things? So that questioning ourselves, and is it still achieving the intent that we wanted?
Exactly.
Well, whānau, I just want to say we're coming up to like 1/4 the top of the hour, which was our intended time to wrap up. So, you know, now's like the last chance to like get a word in if you'd like, or, you know, ask any questions of our esteemed matua here. Otherwise, we, I don't know, Matua, how you thinking? We'll be wrapping up soon.
Yeah.
Any final sort of remarks, or unless Samuel? I just saw Samuel take his mic off. Did you?
Oh, tēnā
did you wish to? Yeah, Samuel.
Tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koe, Sam.
Ko te mihi tuatahi kia koe te rangatira, Ross, mo te karakia, kia whakatūwhera te hui nei. Tēnā koe e ho.
Tēnā koe.
Kia koe anō Catherine, mo tō mātauranga, mo te karanga, mo te hui nei. Tēnā koe. Kia koutou katoa, he mihi ana mai kia koutou. Ko Hamuera Ruihi tuku ingoa no tūranga nui a Kiwa.
Tēnā koe.
Mai te taha o tuku pāpa o keiko nei, a toku mama kei Ngāti Toa Rangatira. Me te tauhihu o te waka, kia taranaki hoki. Nō reira, e mihi rawa atu ki o koutou. Yeah, some interesting points. I've really enjoyed this hui today, tonight. No, lovely to, you know, it's so much to cram into a small amount of time. You know, beautiful to see us connecting back to atu. A lot of people don't talk about that today, but it is certainly on the rise, as you have outlined, Ross, and of the utmost importance. You know, ngā tō whakaaro mo te kōrero, kei hea Hawaii nui, Hawaii ro, Hawaii pama mā. I mean, it's all part of the journey to where we got here. And it's certainly, if we are to go back to where we came from, that's where we need to go to return. I think some of the points you really outlined and a lot of questions really lead to asking, where are we? What's happening? And certainly it highlights that we need someone to make a decision for us, or so they seem to think. We are certainly, as a collective, not healthy, and that's a worldwide thing. And that's why this really is so can be so impacting. But you know, we have a look at the numbers today, and you know, there might be 8,000 you know, registering as sick. There's probably a few more. There's lots of whānau don't bother to register it, and he pai te rā. However, there are 20 odd dying, and that's life. But the numbers in ratio to what's happening, it doesn't actually qualify what we've been through for the last 2 years. And my father died many years ago, and he died of a COVID. And so that was the Hong Kong flu. It was back in 1970. And he received that, and within a week he was dead. And so he knew who he was. He was a great rangatira, and he knew where he was going, and he had no qualms about leaving this place. He was quite sure of absolutely everything. And I think there's a lot of unsureness which you've raised, Catherine, and I think we all need to be empowered and enhanced with knowledge that actually belongs to us. It's the makeup of who we are. When my mother had me at birth, there was a new drug that was out, and that drug was a thalidomide, and it was a morning sickness drug that they were giving. My mother was very old when she had me, and they were giving it as a morning sickness drug. Anyway, she didn't like it, and it made her worse. So she stopped taking it. Thank goodness for me, because everyone my age, or many babies my age, all ended up with missing limbs and all sorts of things, and it was all from that one particular drug. So when this epidemic came through, or this virus, you know, I'm very careful at what I take, and I've also have a wealth of life experience behind me. And so, of course, there was no way no one was putting anything into me that I didn't know anything about. And also, I'm in charge of what I do, not someone who thinks they're in charge of what I do. So, yeah, I think we need to look at the big picture. And the biggest thing that I see is actually, you know, this thing has divided whānau, but it shouldn't have. We should actually not be partaking in this rubbish that takes place on social media and all this division and not allowed to divide a whānau, but, you know, be wise and put plans in place and respect one another. And actually, what's the main thing? It's about us making decisions for ourselves, and actually us giving support to one another. And so, you know what, if you want to look after the old queer, we'll put plans in place to look after the queer who doesn't want to get injected, you know. And so I think that's the greatest lesson that I've learned out of this, but also it's the evidence where actually this government needs to make decisions on our behalf, because what they have got is a series of actions that have brought us into a place of being very unhealthy. And that's a worldwide thing. So it says that we need to change and bring balance back into our lives. And so, anyway, I just like to meet you fellas for calling this hui, and wish you all of the best. And yeah, I look forward to joining you again.
Tēnā koe matua. Tēnā koe.
I was just going to tautoko what you said, Samuel. And I think that was some of, I was lucky in the discussions that Mātua Ross and I had helped me to help others, and just actually listening to them and acknowledging to them that they knew what was best for them, and that whatever decision they made for them, as long as they understood it, they'd looked into it, and that, you know, that I would support them no matter what their decision was. They still, you know, and that was a huge difference in a lot of people, was just that the non-judgment, but just actually caring was, and I picked that up in what you said. So yeah, thank you.
Mm. Yeah, just picking up on what you were saying, Sam, Matua, and there's an Indian guru or an Indian philosopher, and he says it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So what we're doing is we're just adjusting to society and thinking that it's healthy, but it's not. And I guess it starts within our own homes, I guess, and within our own families and our own, the way that we empower ourselves to empower others, because nobody else going to do it for us. And just on Hawaii, one of our tupuna and Catherine would know of Preme Puata. And I can remember him having an interview with Quentin Hitta, and it was about Hawaii. And what he said was, you have to have a look at the word, and you'll see two words that are have energy in them. And the first one is ha, and the other one is wai. And he's saying, when we say it, we say Hawaii hiki. And what he's saying is, from your Hawaii is whatever you make of it. If your home is your Hawaii, then that's what it is. But he's saying the ha me te wai hiki, mauria. And in the word, as you know, in the word mauria, we see the word mauri. So you're taking the mauri of that ha and the wai. So I guess for this discussion here, this is our Hawaii, and that you've all been able to be part of the ha, and you've all been part of the wai, and now you take this and you lift it and you move it on to somewhere else, and you talk about what you've learned, you know, what you've learned today or heard today, and that's the mauria, the energy and the mauri of the ha me te wai. And of course, there are those Hawaii nui, Hawaii roa, and Hawaii pā mau mau that I've heard too in our journeys from Hawaii in the different lands. But that was his meaning of the word Hawaii. Hawaii hiki is to uplift and move it on, plant it in another place, share it with other people. It's just I mean, we're the vessels at the end of the day, eh? We're the waka. You know, myself and Catherine are the manifestations of Ruanui, because that was our navigator, was Ruanui on board the waka Mamari. So we come through that whakapapa, therefore we are the waka, and all we're doing is carrying it on in the current situation. We're the waka, lifting it up, moving it on, lifting it up, moving it around, and just, yeah. So tēnā koe, mihi atu nei ki a koe, you know, been a good night. I think I've got some, unless my whānau's finished shelling the oysters, I've got oysters to shell. Nā reira ngā mihi kia koutou.
Kia ora matua. On that summation note and final remarks, just inviting you to do a karakia whakamutunga, and just for after that, when everyone leaves, can we stay on? Because I just want to make sure that I correctly pause or stop this recording. And where to from here we'll probably, I don't know, get it up on a YouTube channel or something.
Yeah, and we'll invite some other tohunga and, or, you know, just somebody who wants to share what the knowledge that they have. So we start something. Like you're saying, we want to create a network of wisdom keepers. There's a lot of people out there with wisdom that haven't been allowed to share that knowledge. We need to get them before they pass away, I guess. But hey, nō re tēnā tātou. Ka pai. Te pau, te toko I whenuku, te toko I wherangi, tokia, tukia, ko te mumu, ko te apa, ko te mumu, ko te apa, ko te manihi kai o tā tākiri, pana, karau I runga, karau I raro, kia pai tā more I runga, kia pai tā more I raro, tēnā ko te pau, te pau orongo Māori ora.
Tēnā koe.
Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora everybody, pomari e. Mā te wā, we'll see you.
Tēnā tātou.
So Matua, we'll stay on, eh? You and me?
I'm just going to grab a water.
Oh, cool, cool.
Okay.
I wonder if I can just pause this. Not stop it, because it might stop the... Pause it? Rachel's... Rachel, I don't suppose you know if it's okay I push the pause button?
Yeah, you should be able to stop the recording without closing out.
Okay.
Unless you want to keep recording. But you should be able to